Hello, and welcome to Keep the Channel Open. My name is Mike Sakasagawa, and this is episode 16. This week's guest is New York photographer Jennifer McClure. I think the first time I saw Jennifer's work was a few years ago in a lens scratch feature, and I was immediately drawn to the cinematic quality of her photos and to the poignancy of them, the poignancy of the narrative. And I thought, here's a person who's a searcher. And I recognize that search. I think really a lot of the work that speaks to me tends to be this work that's about searching, trying to figure out something essential about life through personal experience. There's a power in that, I think, a clarity and an honesty, and it's something I respect a lot. With Jennifer's work, I first knew her series Laws of Silence, which was about a journey of self-exploration, figuring out how to find your own story instead of the one that's put on you when you're young. And then later there was her series You Who Never Arrived, where she recreated scenes from her memories of past relationships. And man, that one just blew me away. Let me read you the statement for that one. I have a long history of temporary relationships punctuated by extended periods of isolation. As 40 loomed closer, I decided to examine the meltdowns and the patterns to find out where I was responsible. I restaged my memories in hotel rooms, which are as impersonal and unlived as my romances tended to be. The opening of old wounds unintentionally shed light on current patterns as lines blurred between the past and the present. The hotel rooms, sets that were always surprises, took on a different role. They came to stand for the complete lack of control that I feel in relationships. I have been chasing an image that doesn't exist. I am more comfortable dreaming about relationships than being in one. The stories I tell myself about my loves are far more dramatic than the actual shared experiences, and the disconnect between fantasy and reality became increasingly apparent with each staged narrative. This project is a mourning for an entire system that no longer works. And then it ends with a quotation from Roland Barthes. Amorous passion is a delirium, but such delirium is not alien. Everyone speaks of it. It is henceforth tamed. What is enigmatic is the loss of delirium. One returns to what? So, now more recently, Jennifer's been working on a portrait project with singles, looking at the different ways people relate to the status of being single, which, as she points out, is more common than not. More than half of the adult population of the U.S. is single now. I've been following that project as she's developed it for a while now, and so I was really excited to get a chance to talk to her about it and about the rest of her work. So let's just jump right in, shall we? Here's my conversation with Jennifer McClure. Yeah, so how have you been?
I've been okay. I took a long break from photographing, and I've just been starting again, and it feels great.
Yeah, I saw that you had recently started shooting for your singles project again.
Yes.
So that's exciting.
It's really exciting. Well, I also took a workshop here in the city with Maggie Stieber. Do you know Maggie Stieber?
Yeah, I don't know her personally, but I know of her work.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry. Her work is amazing, and I saw she was doing a 5-day workshop here in the city, and I just thought that would be the best way to dive back into a project, and it really helped.
Yeah. How was that? How did it...
It was great. She's an amazing teacher. She's one of those people who doesn't teach you to shoot like her, but she helps you shoot more like yourself. Which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
For someone to do that with, 14 different people in the classroom.
Yeah. My impression of her work has been that she has such a real strong sense of narrative.
Yes, and that's on it.
Yeah. I can see where that would be really useful for the kinds of things that you do.
Yeah, it's weird. I can't do a narrative so much with this particular project.
Right.
But I think moving forward, it helps me quite a bit for what I'm going to do next. But this project is shooting all different people.
Right.
So it's not one of those projects that's a it's not a typology because all the portraits are very different, but it's also not a story. There's no beginning and middle and end.
Right, right. So, I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious. So this project, just for listeners, it's that they're all portraits of people who are single. Yes?
Yes, in New York City.
In New York City. And how did this get started? How did it come about?
Well, I think it's funny. All my projects are kind of related. When you sit down, even though they look very different, there actually is a central theme, and it's about connection or feeling a lack of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of that is true and how much of that is some narrative that we impose on a situation.
Mm.
And because my last project was a lot about why I never got married or had kids or got a regular, or I never did any of the things that were expected of me or that I was trained to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm 44 now, and I'm still single.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it might always be that way. I have no idea. But I was realizing, it might be that way. I might be single for the rest of my life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing.
Right.
I feel like there are so many people who are happily single.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is that single people now outnumber married people.
Right, right.
In this country. It's a growing trend. So it's not just me.
Right.
And I think I don't know, a lot of people go through this, whether they're divorced, whether they're widowed, whether they never got married. There's so many different aspects to this that I think are pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, the last couple of days I was looking through your website again, just sort of refreshing my memory about your work. And actually there was a couple of projects in there that I hadn't been aware of before, but it seemed to me like this idea of things not sort of going to the story was a strong sort of theme in all of your work, that we all kind of have this idea that things are supposed to go a certain way and that your life is supposed to be a certain thing, but that it actually usually doesn't go that way. And it seemed like there's like just thinking about your projects as an arc, moving from something like You Who Never Arrived to now your singles project, there's like this arc of acceptance of that, which, personally, I find that very, I don't know what the right word is, but it's nice, Yeah,
that's exactly what's going on. There is a lot more acceptance these days,
mm-hmm.
which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think maybe more drama creates more interesting stories. But if I want to, I can always make something up later, Mm-hmm. I can do one of those kind of stories. That's the beauty of what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, like in your previous projects, there's sort of a certain sort of melancholy feeling to them, where with this new one, it feels a lot more celebratory.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself gravitating. I mean, I want to get all kinds of people, but I do find myself gravitating towards people who are perfectly content to be single.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the idea of sort of being comfortable in your own skin and being comfortable with what your situation is, I think that's like a thing that a lot of us, are looking for, and some people find and some people don't find. But it's nice to see. It's nice to see. It's nice to show. It's hard to show in a photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To be very honest, to make an interesting photograph about somebody who's pretty happy with themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's much easier to show a more dramatic emotion.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Although, I think that's something that definitely comes out in the pictures that you've shared so far of this project, that there is this confidence that comes out of your subjects. And I think too, like, just there's a confidence in the photographs themselves,
That's nice to hear. Thank you. Well, no, I try, when I explain this project to people, sometimes they have this thought that I'm just going to show them as sad and lonely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't. I mean, I get rejections for this all the time. For every 5 people I ask, 1 will say yes. And I think it's because of that. And I don't really know how to explain to them. It's not about that. Like we're going for a much more positive thing here.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's other people's preconceived notions too, maybe. You know, I don't know what they're bringing to the table about their feelings about being single.
Yeah. But I mean, I think one of the things that's really valuable about a project like this, you know, not just for you, the photographer, or for your subjects particularly, but also for the audience, is that, you know, in some way seeing yourself represented is a way of normalizing what your experience is, and it makes you feel, you know, it can make you, like when you see that other people are you know, having sort of a similar experience to you, that can help you find acceptance for yourself too.
It completely does. That's exactly how it works. And I wonder sometimes if this is my own selfish form of therapy that I'm dragging other people into.
I kind of feel like every artist sort of wonders about something like that, or at least the ones who are self-aware enough to be making good art.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
But there's some times where, I mean, and I think everybody does this no matter what, where sometimes, you know, without getting too self-helpy here, but there's a lot of negative chatter that goes on in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And if you leave it in there and let it bounce around too long, you really start to believe it.
Yeah.
And there are some times when I'm talking, because we talk for quite a while before we actually shoot for these sessions. And a lot of times I'll hear somebody else say something that's been bouncing around in my head, and I can look at them and say, that's a little ridiculous. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't do it to myself. It's only when I hear someone else say it.
Yeah.
If that makes any kind of sense.
It does. It completely does.
Yeah. And I don't know how to explain, you know, I can't tell somebody you're wrong. But we do try and talk about that too. I'm like, I've had that thought too, and it sounds a little like it's just not true. Some of the things we say to ourselves.
Yeah. It can be kind of difficult it's often easier to accept other people, you know, and say things like, well, people aren't perfect and it's okay to be whatever way when you're talking about someone else than when you're talking about yourself. I certainly deal with that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it does help me to recognize, you know, like it's very basic. I hear a phrase that I've said to myself, and that's when I realize that's not a true thing I've been telling myself.
Yeah, I was just reading this book. Maybe a month ago, I finished reading this novel called A Little Life, and there were it was a similar thing where like some of the characters in there would say things that you know I would recognize myself saying, and it would be like, you know, it does help you kind of come to a realization of, wow, this seems a lot more ridiculous when that person says it. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly how it works.
Yeah.
One of my first projects I ever did was when, you know, I wish I could go back in time and do this project better, because I think it was more important to me than it turned out to be photographically.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, you do the best you can with what you got. But when I quit drinking and doing drugs,
mm-hmm.
and I put an ad in the Village Voice asking if any alcoholics or drug addicts wanted to do a photo project with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I put an ad in the Village Voice, and a bunch of people answered, and I wouldn't recommend this as a course of action for anybody in the world who's attempting sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
Because in hindsight, it was incredibly stupid on a, you know, personal well-being level.
Mm-hmm.
But I went and I hung out with drug addicts and alcoholics
mm-hmm.
for hours.
Yeah.
And we mostly talked, you know, it wasn't that many pictures. It was all talking. But to hear them say the things that I had been saying when I was drinking and doing drugs, and realizing just how absolutely ridiculous it was, convinced me that I needed to really stay stopped.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just so funny how you can't hear yourself sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I had not actually until this week that series and the other one, the Lullaby, a Broken Song. I hadn't.
Oh, the moms and the clinic.
Yeah, I had not been aware of either of those. I had only known your other two, you know, sort of more personal, self-portrait-y kind of series. You know, these two were these both older series?
Yeah, these are both older. The first one was from 2005,
Mhm.
and the other one I think was a year and a half, 2 years later, maybe a little more.
Because they look just visually, they're stylistically very different from your self-portraiture series.
Yeah.
But also, like, even there, I feel like this theme of sort of a life narrative and things not going the way that you thought they were going to go is common with these series as well. But since they're focused outwards, they feel very different.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And they don't seem as much like my photos, even though they were really integral into me getting to where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is just something that you have to do with photographs. I think you have to take them for a long time before you start to get your own style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly something that I feel like everybody, when they're first starting out, kind of has this thing where they look at other people and they say, oh, you have such a style, how do I get a style? And I feel like it's kind of something that just happens, you know?
It really does. And you always hear people, like I've heard this at portfolio reviews, I've said this at portfolio reviews, and I've heard it in classes where everyone says, like, when people want your work, they want it because of your style.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you don't know how to tell somebody how to do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does just take a lot of time, and sometimes you got to shoot through. I wouldn't say people always imitate other photographers, but you've got to shoot through all your influences.
Yeah.
And exhaust them, and then you get to where you are.
Right. I do think it's pretty, I mean, maybe not everybody, but it seems like pretty common for people to start off emulating the people that they worship.
Yeah, I certainly did, and I do highly recommend that, actually, as a course of action.
I mean, it teaches you.
Yeah, but you do it, and then eventually, as a human being, you're going to get tired of shooting someone else's work.
Yeah.
And you're going to be forced to move on.
Yeah. I find that oftentimes the style sort of comes out of, you know, just your own way of thinking and seeing things. And, you know, eventually the thing that you hit on is because you're trying to say a certain thing a certain way, that the style just sort of comes out of that.
Yeah, exactly. But even knowing that I have a certain style, which again, I have a hard time putting my finger on my own style.
Yeah. And
every now and then somebody will say something about my work, and I'm like, oh, that's it. Of course, that's it. But I can't describe it.
Yeah, I think.
And when I started shooting these singles, I had a really hard time.
Mm-hmm.
Probably because I was shooting other people again for the first time in years.
Mm-hmm. But
I couldn't find my own style shooting other people.
Yeah.
Which was very, very confusing.
Yeah, I bet.
And I remember I showed these at a portfolio review, and a bunch of people said, we like these, but we want them to look more like your other work.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, well, that's just, I have no idea how to even do that.
Yeah. It's sort of a tough thing when the emotional content, too, will shift, you know?
Yeah.
Because a lot of, you know, your self-portrait series, both of them, like I was saying, they have a certain melancholy to them. And the way that they're lit in particular, you have this very cinematic lighting in many of them, really heightens that emotion. But it's not really the same emotion that you're going for with these new pictures. So figuring out how to come at this new thing, but still have them be recognizably your style. I mean, I can see where that would be challenging.
It's hard. And with the self-portraits, if it's just me and a camera, I mean, I'll do whatever I tell myself to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't hold back, obviously, because I'm not embarrassed. There's nobody watching me but me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm able to really let go more than I think other people are willing to do when it's me behind the camera.
Yeah.
You know, if I left them alone in the room with the camera and gave them a clicker, they might come up with some really interesting stuff.
Maybe.
But with me there, like, it's hard. It's hard to explain to people what I want.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a whole different dynamic. I really, you know, I have much greater respect for a lot of portraitists lately.
Yeah. I've certainly never really figured out how to do, posed portraits with any sort of, it's hard. It's definitely hard because people, you want people to open up, but that requires a certain vulnerability for your subjects, and that finding a way for people to feel comfortable enough to do that, especially if you don't have a long-standing relationship with them, can be real difficult.
That's the thing, because oftentimes I do work with strangers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I give everybody a short list of questions before I meet with them so I can get to know them a little better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can also have an idea about what kind of portrait we're going to make and where we're going to make it. And sometimes I've noticed, like when I start to talk about something that they've mentioned in the questions, which again, they filled out by themselves on the computer, they might be a little more willing to be open than they are when we're actually one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
When we start talking about it, sometimes I can see people just shut down. It's a body language thing. It's how they start talking to me. I can see that they become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And they feel like they've told me too much. And I try really hard to help. I want everybody to be comfortable, and I try really hard to make that happen. But there have been a couple times where I could tell I just lost somebody entirely, and you can see that in the portrait. Because it's really hard to be that vulnerable.
Yeah.
Along with that, I've had a lot of people ask me if I'm doing audio as well, or video. And I know a lot of people, that's where everything is going these days. They're going multimedia.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, I always feel, just on the topic of vulnerability, like it's already hard enough for someone to open up and talk about this stuff and about their insecurities and their fears or, whatever. I feel like adding a recorder to that would just be like, sticking a pin into the specimen bug and put, you know what I mean? Like it's too much.
Yeah.
And it would make somebody feel incredibly overanalyzed and awkward, and they would shut down even more than they already do.
Yeah. People definitely have a different sort of relationship with sort of more continuous recording than they do with stills.
Yeah. And I just feel like it would be I try to imagine someone coming to my house and, setting up a tape recorder and then taking a picture and asking me to do these things while I tell them, what I think is wrong with me, why nobody might ever love me, or, whatever someone's point of view is on the situation. And it just sounds awful.
Yeah. Oh, goodness gracious.
I'm always so amazed when people agree to do this project with me.
Yeah.
And it's not all like that. I'm just, I'm giving you a couple of the scenarios that didn't quite work out well. A lot of them are really fun, and it's very positive, and, I don't mean to imply that they're all like that.
Oh, no, not at all. But it is certainly, even just something like doing this podcast, I can kind of relate to what you're saying. There is a certain, when you want to approach someone to participate in a thing that you're doing, and you don't necessarily know how they're going to feel about it, and you are asking people to give you something essentially, and that's it certainly makes you feel aware of that kind of thing and aware of a certain sense of responsibility to make sure you're doing it well. Yes.
Exactly. And there have been a couple times where I realized that I took a really boring portrait of a very interesting person. And that feels, I'm like, oh, they gave me so much, and I couldn't give back what I needed to give.
Yeah, it's tough. I will say, what, the on your website, the gallery is closed right now, but what you have shared of it on Facebook so far, it really does seem like you're onto something.
I hope so. Yeah, I should have given you the password before we started talking. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, whatever. It does seem like this is the kind of project where, at least at this stage, you'd want it to be fairly private.
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. And plus I want to integrate text in there, and I haven't figured that part out. But I did want to put some work up on the website so the people who are involved in the project can see what they're a part of. I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely. It gives people a way of, just some context.
Yeah, and I always try and send people one of the photos, because I want them to see. And I had one experience where somebody saw the photo and hated it and demanded to be removed, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But everyone else has been pretty fantastic. But if you want to take a look, the password is just NYC, all caps.
Okay, I will make sure to edit that part out of the show.
Well, I don't mind if people look. I just don't want it to be considered published yet.
Right. That's actually, it's an interesting thing because that's something that people talk about a lot is, at what stage you should be sharing a project. And there are definitely some people, like there is a photographer in Tucson who I'm a gigantic fan of. Her name's Lisa Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
And she is very, very private about her pictures until the series is completely done.
Yeah.
And I certainly, I can respect the integrity of that approach, but for me, I find like, I always want to I don't know if I'm ever like sort of shooting myself in the foot career-wise by doing stuff like this. Seems like people have a lot of different opinions, but I always kind of find that I, even when something is still in progress, I still want to kind of share how it's going.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But sometimes I share how it's going and I don't necessarily like the feedback that I get.
Yeah, that's true.
But a lot of times it's good feedback. I just didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. I mean, I think that there's a thing I know I do sometimes where if I work on something and I'm feeling doubts about it, like I might sort of know on some level that there's a problem with it, and then I'll ask somebody for feedback, and they'll say the thing that I already kind of knew was the problem, but then it's very disappointing to hear that actually is true.
The confirmation is pretty awful.
Yeah.
But I've also had times where I've shown the work to someone and gotten, feedback that wasn't great, and then realizing later that this person and I actually have very different styles of working.
That's true.
And it's, people have different tastes, and sometimes people will give you a critique based on the way they shoot or what they like.
Yeah, and it's hard to know, when you're in a whatever venue that is, it's kind of hard to know sometimes what advice to take, because you don't want to be the kind of person who's you're closed off and is like not willing to take feedback and useful critique, but also like on some level you have to be able to judge which ones you're going to listen to also, and it's hard to figure out.
It's really hard to figure out, and especially as an artist, when somebody can tell you 10 things about your work and 9 are great and 1 is negative, all you're going to remember is the 1 negative.
Yeah.
So it's hard. I guess you have to give it a couple days and sit with that one thing that you're obsessing over until you're sick of it. And then you go back and focus on the 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's hard.
It is. It is hard. So, now these portraits, how do you find the people that you're shooting?
For singles?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Lately I'm just thinking about how to expand that, how to get a wider net out in there.
Mm-hmm.
New York City is a big city. I ask people, I ask friends, I ask people I work with, photo friends. I also bartend to make money, and some of my bar customers have participated. And Facebook, man, I put something on Facebook like a year ago and I got a great response. And I was doing this class for Maggie Stieber. I posted something and I got like 5 people in a week, which was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, and some are just friends of friends. I have friends who spread the word, which is very generous. So it's always nice when I get an email out of nowhere with somebody saying, "Hey, I heard about your project. I'd love to be a part of it."
Yeah. I mean, once the thing sort of has, a certain amount of steam, it seems like maybe it would take on a life of its own.
That's what I'm hoping. Yeah. I mean, that's also why I finally put a gallery on the website, because I want to be able to show new people what you're getting into. Because in the beginning, it was just so nebulous. I didn't know what to say to people. Yeah. But now I can just show them, like, here, this is what you're going to be doing. And I do want it to be a collaboration. I like for people to come with ideas of their own. And so I think, if they're able to take a look at work that's already there, then they'll get a better idea of what they need to help me with. Right. Because I do need help. I can't do it by myself.
Yeah. And you're mostly shooting these in people's own spaces, yeah?
I was in the beginning.
Okay.
Shooting everybody in their apartments. And I
Uh-huh.
was pretty, adamant about that. That's how I wanted it to be. Which some people said no automatically to that because they didn't want that to happen. But I do want to stress that I get told no a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm actually so okay with it, and it's been a good lesson for me.
Yeah.
Rejection-wise, it's been enormously helpful.
Yeah.
But I started work on this, I guess, about a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked pretty well for a while. And I took it to the portfolio review, to Photolucida. So a lot of the feedback I'm talking about that I got is from that review. And I showed it to an editor. And it was the last review of the last day. So I was like, look, let's just be honest. Let's not beat around the bush. What needs to happen? What's not working? And she asked me why I was shooting everybody in their apartments. And I said, well, that's because that's where I feel the most single.
Mm-hmm.
At home alone at night. And she goes, no, you're doing it all wrong. You have to ask everybody where they feel the most single. And that was a huge moment. I said, you're absolutely right. And so I didn't work on it for a while after that, but when I started again, that's what I started doing. And I feel like it really made a huge difference for the better.
That's interesting. That is not something I would have thought of. I guess that's I guess that's the great thing about being able to get, someone else's angle and someone else's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
It was a good lesson in the collaboration process too.
Yeah.
And the answers people give me are fascinating. So it's actually really fun, it makes it more exciting than just going to someone's apartment. So, this is something that's been on my mind lately. I guess it's about why we do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
What are our goals? And where are we going with it?
Yeah.
It's kind of a nebulous topic.
Yeah.
But, because I don't know about you, but I didn't go to art school.
Me neither. Definitely not.
Yeah, so I'm not one of these kids who, started taking pictures when I was 14 or 15, knew I wanted to do it, went to art school, went to grad school. Like, I'm not one of those people who's been through that certain channel.
Mm-hmm.
I envy people who knew early on what they wanted to do and did it.
Mm-hmm.
And went after that. I think that's fantastic. But I never did that. And so I have a hard time. I struggle with the fact that I have this other job that has nothing to do with photography. And, where am I going with all this? What am I doing? I put hours of my life into this practice. And I do love it, but sometimes I just sit back and I go, what am I working towards? Because I know enough people in the business now to know what it means to have a book.
Mm-hmm.
Know what it means to have a gallery show. And I know the expense can be enormous.
Yeah.
And it's not all about the money, but I'm just not sure what's the end result that I'm going for,
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where my work fits into the spectrum of all the work that's out there today.
Yeah.
Because you can see, I'm in New York City and I know what work is out there, and I go to MoMA and I go to the Met, I go to galleries, and I know that a lot of the work that's doing great right now is conceptual.
Mm-hmm.
Or in this other world, in this other sphere, it's photojournalism.
Right.
And then there's work like mine and like yours that's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Where's the place for that?
Gosh, that is...
So it's a very nebulous sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think about this a lot.
This is like you could have just been pulling this right out of my own brain, I swear. Because I've been thinking about a lot of the exact same things. Because this isn't what I do for my work either. I'm actually an electrical engineer for my day job, which is about as far as you can get from art as possible. But yeah, and I didn't go to art school either. I went to tech school, and that thing about, well, like, one, why did I get started in this? Like, what is it? What in my life has led me to the point that I needed to do this? But also, where it's all going. I mean, that question literally keeps me up at night sometimes.
Yeah, me too. And I wish it didn't, but it does. And I wish I could be one of those people who just made art for art's sake.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I am.
Yeah.
But at the same time, wow, it's funny you're an electrical engineer. Your photos are so intimate and so...
It's not what you'd expect from knowing my day life.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by that. And I don't know when you have time to do this stuff, because you've got 3 kids?
3, yeah.
That's crazy. Do you not sleep?
I don't sleep a lot.
That's the secret. There's a couple of people I know who are very successful and get a lot done, and they hardly sleep.
I don't know about successful, but I do try to get a lot done. I go through spurts sometimes or sometimes I'll just get a little too run down and need to take some time off. But
yeah,
I don't really like taking time off from my personal work. If I want to take time off from something, I want it to be my job, not.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
But I mean, that thing about making art for art's sake, it's one of those things where, and this is something where I feel kind of like there's something in common. I mean, maybe I don't want to speak for you, but at least for myself, I feel like I don't want to just make the work that I make, whether it's, if I take a picture or if I write a poem or something. I don't want to just, be like Emily Dickinson and stick it in a desk drawer or something.
Right.
There's a thing where, it's, if what I'm trying to do is express myself, I want to express myself to somebody,
Yeah. Exactly. There's a need you need someone to see what you've made.
Mm-hmm.
And not just a friend of yours who's going to go, that's great.
Yeah, it's nice that, my mom, for example, is very nice about and my mother-in-law, both of my in-laws, they're great, and they're very willing to say very nice things about it, but it's not really sufficient for me anyway to just have, my mom say nice things about my pictures.
Yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my family didn't have a lot of nice things to say about mine for a long time. I've trained them now just to say that's great.
Yeah. I think it might be kind of hard. I mean, I guess I don't want to minimize that at all. I can kind of see where if your work is so personal, and some of the feelings that are in it might be kind of hard to see for someone who loves you,
Yeah, and I think, I think it was hard for my parents to see themselves in some of the photos.
Mm-hmm.
But it opened up a dialogue. I wouldn't say it's an ongoing dialogue, but, we got to talk about some of the things.
Yeah.
That, nobody ever talked about ever.
Yeah.
And it brought up a lot of stuff. And they finally, they told me the truth about a lot of stuff that happened when I was a kid, which I really needed to know.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I guess I got something out of that project, didn't I? I got some peace of mind.
Yeah. I mean, why we make art is I mean, I do wonder about that all the time. There's a sort of thing, because I struggle with this. So much of what I do is really just trying to take the inside of my mind and put it and make it visible to people. Yeah. And there's a way that feels selfish, I mean, there was a thing you said earlier in this conversation where you kind of felt like, it was therapy for you.
Yeah.
And there's that feeling for me as well. And sometimes I feel like, well, I don't know why I have to do my therapy in public, but
right.
But I also, one of the things that has drawn me so much to your work and to other people's work who are also telling really personal stories is that seeing personal stories and seeing what other people are going through, especially when it's something that I have felt as well, but even when it's not, there's a moment of connection there. And I kind of feel like for a lot of us, it's just, feeling less alone is something that we're all looking for,
I agree. And, in this day and age when And I'm guilty of this myself. I'm not condemning other people for doing this. But in this day and age where we present a lot of our best selves on social media, sometimes it's really refreshing to see somebody else be honest.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like even with the more connection that's available to us, it's not necessarily real connection. So to have these moments where you look at someone else's work and it's, you know, because I like work too that tells stories and is honest, and even if it's a little painful, but I connect to that. It's crazy. You connect to an image sometimes more than you connect to, you know, one of your best friend's Facebook posts.
Yeah. Facebook in particular can be sort of this just relentless flood of positivity sometimes, and that's great, but it's also kind of not what I want to see sometimes. It's
not. It's exhausting. I feel like we should have an anti-Facebook where everybody just goes on there and they're completely honest, and nobody ever says stop whining or it's going to be fine. Someone just goes, I hear you.
Yeah, it is a thing where, and it like basically everything that I end up feeling really drawn to, I feel like, on at least stuff I see on the internet, it all tends to be stuff that is that more honest stuff, that is, you know, people telling it, you know, and not trying to put a shine on it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are able to do that, you know, a lot of documentary photographers, they're able to do that with other people. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to turn it back on you or your family or your loved ones or yourself. You know, it's hard.
It is. And you also, for me anyway, I always sort of feel like, even if, and I guess this kind of gets back to that thing that you were saying about, you know, when you're talking to people that you're taking pictures of, portrait subjects, and they'll say something that you recognize, you say yourself, and it feels easier to accept it with other people. It's the same kind of thing with my work. I feel like I go through a thing where I so value these, you know, really personal stories from other people, and I'll talk about how, as an audience member, feeling that connection and feeling like it's so valuable to me to see other people's stories. But then when it comes to my own story and putting that out there, it'll feel like I'm being selfish, or like that I'm being presumptuous to assume that somebody else might get that from my work.
Oh, you feel like, who cares?
Yeah, I feel like like there's a thing where it's like, well, yeah, those people make work, and it's really, I mean, it's really moving, and when I see their work, I feel a connection, and they're just telling their own story. But then if I feel like, you know, like it's almost a little egotistical to assume that, like, if I did the same thing, then I would be providing that experience to somebody else, even though I actually have had people tell me that.
Yeah, but it's not egotistical. Even on a statistical level, people will identify. It's just true.
Yeah.
You know? There's always somebody who will, and people have told you, but it's funny how you listen to that voice in your head before you listen to the actual true voice. Mm-hmm. Something someone said to you.
Yeah.
That's human nature, though, you know? It's like a muscle telling yourself not to listen to that voice. You got to keep exercising that muscle, telling that voice to shut up. Mm-hmm. And it never will. I mean, I think it's always going to be there. I think you'd make really boring art if it weren't there.
Yeah. I occasionally wonder if I'll ever run out of stuff to talk about in my work, but I'm pretty sure I've got enough going on.
Something else will always come up.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got kids too. Come on.
That's true.
They're going to be growing and changing. You've got years of material there.
Yeah.
Wait till they're teenagers.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Well, the one thing I know, and I wish I hadn't had to learn this lesson the hard way either, but I mean, I've had health issues for years, and it's been really frustrating, and I've gone to see every doctor under the sun, and a lot of them have been telling me that it's all in my head. Mm-hmm. Which was terrible. And I even went to a psychiatrist and said, I've been told it's all in my head. Let's try antidepressant, whatever I needed to do, I tried. Mm-hmm. And I was still exhausted the entire time. So I feel like I gave it my best effort. And I just kept getting more and more tired. And I got so tired I couldn't work, which was awful.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to make this a big long story, but just to
No.
explain. And so, as it turned out, I had Lyme disease. And I don't know if I had it all along. I don't know if I got bitten again and it triggered it. It was very confusing. And it didn't feel real to me because it was so confusing. It still doesn't feel real. It still feels like, what was that? Really?
Mm-hmm.
And so the medication they give you makes you feel worse for quite a while. So there was a good 8 or 9 months where I wasn't making any pictures whatsoever. And I do know that during that time I was miserable. And I was miserable partly because I had friggin' Lyme disease.
Yeah.
But also not being able to make artwork. Because all you can do is just pretty much lay on the couch. You can't go. It's hard to interact with people. And if you're taking portraits, you've got to be on.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be on. I tried a couple times and it just didn't go so well. And so I was miserable because I couldn't make art. I wasn't producing anything. And I was trying my best to keep up with the work that I already had and still get that out into the world, but that's not making art.
Yeah.
And so even though I wrestle with these questions of where is it going, what's it all about, I know that quitting isn't an option.
Yeah.
Because I'm so miserable if I'm not making anything. So that's the struggle there. I know I'm not going to stop making work, but then the question is, how much do I need to get back from the work I put out there?
Yeah. The thing I find for myself, once I'm sort of done shooting a project, or at least once it's to the point where I'm able to start pushing it out there, that I find I often lose interest in that particular project, and I get more interested in making the new one than I am with maybe marketing the one that's done.
Exactly.
From a career standpoint, that's probably not the best thing to indulge.
It's not. It's hard. I mean, the trick is that you've got to do both.
Yeah.
Because I have some friends who, because I always feel like, too, I'll give it a year of marketing and putting it out there, and then I feel like, well, everybody's bored with it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case.
No, because there's lots of people that haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, but, in my mind, I just keep thinking everybody's bored. They've got, fatigue with my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard other people say this, too. But, I have some friends who, I don't know if you know of Susan Barnett, who did the T-shirts.
No.
Do you know that work?
Is this I might know the work. I don't know if it's I'm thinking of a guy with I think you see him from the back or something, and he's got
backs of T-shirts.
And there's the one that I'm thinking of is, it almost looks like it's at a fair or something, and he's got a white T-shirt that has a bikini body on it.
Yeah, I know exactly which one you're talking about. Yes.
That's her? Okay.
So that's her, and she, she's been shooting this work for a while. She loves it, and she's now taken it and morphed it into something else. But she worked her ass off marketing that work.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a couple years, but it paid off. And I was like, all right, that's the kind of perseverance that I don't have yet, but I need to cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times that's what it is perseverance.
Yeah.
And it's not just about running on to the next project. You've got to stick with it with the marketing for the older stuff. That's what I need to get better about, too.
I think we all need to get better about that.
Yeah. But the desire is to run off and make something new.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's tough, too, when because that takes energy, too. And the thing, sometimes stuff comes up in your life where you're not able to, for whatever reason, you don't have the energy to invest on that kind of thing. And whether it's just a fallow period or whether it's something like what you went through, I know it can feel really frustrating to not be working. There's a woman that I recently started following on Twitter. Her name is Esme Weijun Wang. And she has this really incredible blog that talks about, among other things, talks about being okay with doing as much as you can and not more than that. And it's an interesting coincidence because she actually is dealing with Lyme disease as well. and is
will you send me that info later?
yeah, I will. I will send you a link, and for the listeners, I'll put a link in the show notes too. But she has a bunch of stuff, about sort of general writing stuff, because she blogs, she writes. She just came out with her first novel recently, but also on Twitter, like she'll have certain days where she'll just talk about how she's really frustrated because she wants to be doing something, or like just the other day she was saying, I think she was tweeting from her bedroom, and she was saying that she'd had guests over and that they had been there for like an hour and a half, and she'd been in her bedroom the whole time. She had to leave and couldn't hang out with them. Like, I guess her husband or boyfriend or whatever had to entertain them, and then it was nice, but she was really frustrated because she was having like an episode and couldn't find the energy.
You can't function. Yeah.
And seeing that, her talk about that in the context of being a writer and feeling like, I really want to be doing something right now. And I feel like she talks about how our culture right now is so obsessed with working all the time and being at capacity. And that if you're not doing something right now, then you're wasting time. And how for her, but not just for her, not just because of her illness, but just for everybody, that it has to kind of be okay. Like, we have to learn how to be okay with taking care of ourselves and allowing ourselves space and time to be able to recharge.
It's incredibly important. And I mean, you know this too, from having a full-time job and 3 kids. Like, you've got to be honest about what you as a human being are capable of doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with our own expectations for ourselves.
Yeah.
And you're right, it does. It does come from outside too. And again, that's the whole social media thing where you're bombarded with everybody's achievements.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly, when I was really ill, like, I spent most of my time beating myself up.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, and I had one of my best friends, I would call her and just be so upset. And she would tell me over and over again, like, you just can't do it right now. You've got to take it easy on yourself. You've got to let yourself rest. Otherwise, you're never going to make more art.
Mm-hmm.
And she was right. And I had another friend who would say it's like, even now, I don't think people do this now because everybody's in a hurry. But when people first started farming, if they had 4 fields, they would farm 3 and let 1 lie fallow.
Mm-hmm.
Because it needs to recharge and regenerate and rest.
Yeah.
And they would rotate. So we have to think about these periods in our lives as just a fallow period. And that's not a negative thing.
Yeah.
But that's the hardest thing to do.
It is. I was talking, that exact thing about farming is something I was talking about. You know Andy Schreiber, right?
Yeah, yes. I love Andy.
Yeah, she's great. And we were talking about that once, and it's because it was the same thing. We were both, at the time, we were going through a period of sort of feeling like our wheels were just spinning. And she found a quote that was basically saying that exact thing, that the fallow period is, in farming is where the soil is recharging, and that is what is going to allow you to do the work later. It was the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to keep that perspective when you're in the middle of it sometimes.
Well, it's so hard, And I mean, the truth of the matter is, like, sometimes, especially with this writer too, and with me, the truth is there's something neurologically happening to your brain that's, there's not a lot of serotonin going around during that kind of time. So it's really hard to stay positive. But even if you're not sick, I think it's hard to let yourself relax. And even now, what I have to do is 1 day a week, I have to force myself to do nothing. And that's all. I don't make any plans. I don't have any errands. I force myself to do absolutely nothing. And it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's the only reason I'm healthy now.
Yeah.
It's not the only reason, but you know what I mean. It's part of the regimen that keeps me going now.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to just relax, isn't it?
It is. It really is. Yeah. Last night I just I didn't work on anything at all. I just read a book for an hour, and it was kind of great.
How long has it been since you've done that? I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. But all I know is I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that the other part will work itself out.
Yeah, it does. I remember I was talking to my wife about this at one point. I don't remember, we were driving somewhere, and I was talking about some thing I was thinking about with my photography, and she just kind of looked at me and she said, you really can't not do this, can you? Like, you really just kind of have to be doing this. I'm like, yeah, I kind of do.
Yeah. You do, I think.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that you do too that I really admire is you write along with your photographs. I thought all of your statements, I don't think I've told you this, all of your statements that are with your projects are extremely well written.
Well, thank you.
And I know you're not blogging as much, but you're very eloquent and you're a thinker.
Well,
I like that.
I try. It's kind of weird right now. I feel like I'm in a sort of a strange in-between sort of place where I'm thinking about photography. I'm putting a lot of energy into this podcast, but that means I have less time available to be working on other stuff. Also, I find that I have trouble sometimes working in more than one mode at a time. And right now I've been really interested in poetry, so I've been working on writing a lot more.
But it's all the same,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, I feel like good photographs are poems.
Yeah. They work in a similar way, or at least they can.
And what you're doing with these podcasts, you know, again, it's that selfish thing where are you giving yourself therapy? Like, you're feeding your own mind with all of these podcasts.
Yeah, that's true. I'm hoping that that my guests and my listeners are getting something out of it too, but certainly I am getting a lot out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody does. I think it's always, I love reading about or hearing or seeing, you know, anything about someone else's process. I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's always helpful.
Yeah. I don't know what to, I mean, I certainly find that as well, that seeing what other people are doing. And that's actually one of the things that I think is so great about getting to talk to people about this stuff, that that learning how other people work and why they're doing the things that they're doing is really, it's not, I mean, it is, I mean, just intellectually very interesting, but also really helps feed my own work, I feel like.
Absolutely. And you know, this is one of the reasons I haven't done any lately, obviously, but one of the reasons I did enjoy doing portfolio reviews, because it's a really intense gathering of people doing just that, all talking about their process and how they work and why they're doing what they do.
I think one of my favorite things about portfolio reviews is, I mean, getting the feedback from the reviewers is certainly valuable, and it's occasionally led to opportunities for me, but the thing I really love about it is just being at a place with a bunch of other photographers and, you know, meeting people that way and getting to see their work and hear them talk about it is really fantastic.
I think it's huge.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest bonuses.
Yeah.
I started a women's photo group here in this city, and part of the reason I did it was just because of that, because I was missing that kind of connection and talking.
Yeah, I saw that. That seems like a really cool thing, to be able to start something up like that.
It is pretty cool. I think for me, that's what it's about. It's about doing what we just talked about and chatting and talking. And I feel like some people come in and they want it to have more of an agenda. And I'm like, no, this is kind of it.
Yeah.
Support and networking.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll show work. I don't know.
Yeah. I joined a group, a pretty similar kind of thing here in San Diego, so late last year, where, you know, we show work sometimes. We do. There's usually at the end, there's a little crit group kind of thing that happens. But a lot of you know, we'll meet for a few hours. Maybe every, 6 weeks or so. And, a lot of it is just sort of chatting and, seeing what's up. It's pretty, I find that very valuable.
I think it's incredibly important.
That group of yours, though, that I thought it was really interesting and really, it seemed like a good thing. Like, there isn't, I feel like one of the things as artists is often that, your practice can be very sort of solitary a lot of times, and having a community can be very valuable. And a lot of times I feel like when we're feeling that way, we'll be looking for someone else to start something and not see something out there and just feel like, well, I guess there isn't anything out there. And being able to take the step of starting something up yourself is, that's pretty great.
Well, I spent a lot of months running around the city saying somebody should really do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized nobody else was going to do it.
Yeah.
So we just did it. And I am trying to have other people help me out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think it should... I think a group like this has a lot of potential. And I don't think it should be about one person starting it.
Right.
I feel like a group is always better served by having more than one person. Because I don't want it to be about, like, it's not about me. It's about the group. Right. But it's hard to get people to commit.
Yeah. It isn't about one person, but at the same time, I think you also got to recognize your contribution there, that, you're part of that in sort of being the motivator there. That's a very valuable thing.
Yeah, it was hard when I was sick to get it going. Mm-hmm. But now that I'm better, I've got a lot of ideas about things we can do that I need to get on to.
Yeah.
And that is exciting.
Yeah.
To realize that you can potentially make something happen for other people.
It seems like, too, with that group in particular, my impression of photography in general, but particularly of the New York photography scene, is that it really kind of does seem like a boys' club.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like, so many of the photographers, like my favorite photographers, are women. It just seems kind of nuts that there wouldn't be more space for, more space in the art world for women to be making work,
I know what you mean. Well, the thing is, it's not that women aren't making work.
But the work isn't being, shown widely. It isn't being picked up by publishers. It isn't, in the magazine industry, most of the people doing editorial and ad stuff are men.
Well, yeah, and documentary even. Mm-hmm. There have been a few articles going around about that lately, which are really great. Mm-hmm. And about how to make change. There was an article, I'm not sure if you saw it. Anastasia Taylor Lind wrote it. Did you read this one?
I don't think so.
I'll send it to you later.
Okay.
I might actually post it on my wall because it was so good, and there were a couple of really great things in there. And it's funny, too, though, because a lot of the photo editors are women. So how, in the editorial documentary world, how are the assignments not... I don't understand that part.
Yeah.
How women and people of color aren't being represented as much as white men, given that women are the photo editors. And it's in terms of the fine art world, I've been trying to get at the bottom of this. Because it's really fascinating to me. Because there are some galleries in New York City who show they're few, but they've got on their roster 50% women, or a couple even have a little more. But the majority, and especially of the blue chip galleries, they're still doing men. Mm-hmm. And where is this coming from? Is this coming from the gallery owners? Is this coming from the collectors who buy the art? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting thing that I think you see this in publishing, with writers. You definitely see it in Hollywood. And I think, it probably bears out in the art gallery scene as well, that for the people who are, because the people who run these, whether it's publishing or movie studios or art galleries, they may have started doing it because of a love of the form, and certainly they have a respect for it, but at the end of the day, they're in it to make money. And I think that there's this impression sometimes that, when it comes to stuff like casting or hiring or choosing who you're going to let through the gates, that certain people and certain types of people are more bankable. But I think that is it's a mistake, because I think it's one of these things where you're looking at a past market and saying, well, this is what's been successful in the past, and not really seeing what potential there could be, not even talking about, representation or what's fair, right, or just. even though those are important, but even just from a financial perspective, I think that there would be, if it was given a chance, there would be a big market for artists of color or women artists that the only reason that market never existed in the past is because they weren't given the opportunity.
Right, because no one's gone out there and tried.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I don't know, and I don't know what it's going to take to bring about change. It's really hard to say. Yeah,
well, I think projects like your group in New York, and I think at the very least, I mean that's a start, and at the very least, the fact that it seems like more and more over the past maybe 5 years, people are really talking about this a lot more now.
Yeah, there's much more of a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things in this article that I loved was that there was a male artist who is going to participate. I think it was a teaching opportunity, and he included a writer that said if there were not women artists and artists of color represented as well, that he would not be participating at all, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get more of that going on in the world, but I thought that was a really interesting thing to do. Somebody who's not trying desperately to hold on to their position, but wants to share.
Yeah. I mean, and the truth is that, I mean, it's always kind of hard to know, right? Like, because people can feel like, well, there are only so many galleries in the world, or in Chelsea, right? And you put all those together and there's only so much space on the walls. And so if I give up my spot, then maybe I won't get it back or whatever. But I think that's kind of a narrow way of looking at it, because there is a lot of room for a lot of different kinds of people to be working.
There is. I agree. And I mean, I'll admit as well that there's some times where opportunities come up and it's like a call for entry for women or something that's specific to me or, something I could use. And my first thought is don't share this. Don't tell anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Increase your own chances here. And then, of course, I sit and I think about it and I'm like, well, that's incredibly narrow-minded and selfish.
Mm.
So yeah, I do end up sharing it because I do think, let the best person win. But I think that's everybody's natural instinct.
Yeah.
Is to be like, don't share this.
Yeah, it can be tough because, I mean, especially because, we all feel like, I think there's something about the way that the world works that makes us feel competitive. But, I have found that, I mean, I guess it's not why I do it, why I try to be more generous, I guess, or why I try to help people out. But it has happened a lot of times that kind of stuff comes back around.
Well, that's what I've realized. And well, the thing is, like, here's what I realized too, is that when I was starting out, there were so many people who were incredibly generous with me.
Mm-hmm. Incredibly.
And even at that time, because I was new to this business, I didn't even realize how much they were giving me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not till later on, a couple years down the road, where I look back and I realized that was such a special thing that they did. And I realized how much it meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do feel like we have an obligation to give that back.
Yeah.
And it's not so much doing it because something will happen for me later, although that would be fantastic, and it has happened that way as well. But it's more about this was given to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it always feels better to help somebody out.
It does. Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, I'm not sure. I think there are a lot of people who don't think that way. And that's fine. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
But how do those of us who do think that way get together and try and make a change for the better?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, speaking of people doing stuff for other people, I really appreciate you giving me your time to be on my show. It really means a lot to me.
Well, thanks for asking.
Yeah.
This hour just flew by.
It really did. It always does.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You are very, very welcome.
That was really good, right? Such an important thing to remember. To give back, to help each other out. This art thing, we can be a community if we put our minds to it. So get out there and do it. All right, so if you want to check out more of Jennifer's work, you can see her portfolio on her site, jennifermcclure.com. There's a link in the show notes for that. Also, coming up, she will be an artist in residence for Whitebox ATX at the West Austin Studio Tour this coming weekend, May 14th and 15th. That's in Austin, Texas, and there's a link in the show notes for that as well. There's an artist reception on the 15th for that event from 5 to 7 p.m., and she'll be doing her singles portraits there. So that'll be a great opportunity to meet her and see what she's doing. Also, she will have work included in a show called The Elevated Selfie Beyond the Bathroom Mirror, which will be at Lightbox Photographic Gallery in Astoria, Oregon from May 14th to June 7th, and then at the Griffin Museum of Photography in Winchester, Mass. From July 12th to September 13th. That looks like a great show, so if you can catch it on either coast, please do check it out. If you've got any comments and questions for me, you can get me at podcast@keepthechanneleopen.com. You can also find me and the show on Twitter at ChannelOpenPod or on Facebook at facebook.com/keepthechanneleopen. If you just want to send me a little encouragement, you could always leave a rating or review on iTunes or Stitcher, and that is also a big help in getting new listeners to find the show. And please subscribe. If you enjoy the show, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and now on SoundCloud. Our theme music is by Poddington Bear. You can find more of his music available for licensing at soundofpicture.com. That's all for this week. Until next time, remember, keep the channel open.